Air Force One is currently in international waters for the first time in history, flying over the recently renamed Gulf of America. Please enjoy. Enjoy the flight, and we are now about to head westbound to Super Bowl 59.
Wow, he did that well. Good voice. Make America great again. That's what we care about.
I don't know if you guys know this, but Google redraws borders based on who's looking at them and where. So for example, let's say you're in China and you say, hey man, I wonder what the border in between China and India looks like. Better open up Google Maps and take a look. This is what you see. And you say, hey man, that's actually pretty cool. That's what I thought it was. Awesome. Now let's say you're in India and you say, I wonder what the exact same border in between India and China looks like. I better open up Google Maps and take a look. And that's what you see. And that's awesome! A group of 30 people in the Silicon Valley went ahead and made a geopolitical decision that affects over 2 billion people with no political oversight. Yes!
Yes, folks, that's right. Beautiful, beautiful Gulf of America, newly christened. My name is David Griscom, joined as always by Matt Leck, Left Wrecking 207. Matt, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay, David. I'm doing better now that the Gulf of Mexico has been renamed to, flatter people like myself.
Again,
so that's definitely delivering for me.
Extremely, extremely odd decision for many, many reasons. Actually, we'll get into that in just a second. I do just have some unfortunate programming notes for y'all. We had a really great conversation with some of the organizers from the Philadelphia Whole Foods Union. Significant victory. They're up against now the Trump administration, Jeff Bezos. Because Jeff Bezos is effectively trying to argue that because of Trump's illegal firing of an NLRB member, that no union elections in the United States of America can be certified. Of course, that is BS, but as everything that we've seen from the American court system, these kind of victories that our movement, that the labor movement has won, are under assault from the right and from the billionaires. It's a really great conversation. Unfortunately, we've had some pretty significant technical issues, and Matt and I are working to try to either schedule another conversation in the future or see if we're able to salvage this one.
Folks,
tonight we're not going to play it. Yeah.
I was confident going into there. I even assured Ben and Edward that actually I'll be able to edit this. I was basically like Pat Mahomes out there. It was a much harder edit than I had bargained on, and unfortunately, there was some technical stuff that we just hadn't anticipated. With not even the stuff that we recognized in the moment, which was difficult, but also some glitches with the software. So
basically what happened is somebody said "Go Birds" at the end of the interview, and
David threw his coffee all over this laptop.
No, I mean, we do apologize to the listener and to the good folks there. We definitely would love to we're hoping to see if we can salvage this, if not to schedule another interview, because really, really great conversation and a lot we can learn from them. So hopefully we'll be able to return to that in the future. But we still got a full show for y'all today. In a little bit, we're going to be joined by Kylie. We're going to be talking about Trump's war on women and on freedom more generally. But before we get there, Matt, I mean, look, obviously the first reaction is that the Gulf of America thing is pretty stupid. I mean, do you have any sense of like who even is into this kind of thing?
Oil companies, I think, is the only real answer I've seen. But this is again theoretical. But I've seen people say this sort of thing is meant to try to stake the decks in some future oil exploration type stuff. That's the only real like material thing.
I can't even.
But I don't like. No, I don't. Even the Trump people, like I know. this isn't it. Like I don't know. Like Gulf of America, okay.
Well, I mean, this is the thing that is I think, kind of baffling about the Trump administration right now is that I don't know what your experience is in New York City. I reckon it's probably way worse than mine here in Austin. But if you've tried to buy eggs in the past few days, I mean, it is like dystopian, frankly. And I'm sure that some people, some true believers in MAGA world, will give Trump a honeymoon. But there's going to be a question about how long that lasts, especially when it is a lot of stuff like this. And I have some polling it's like we'll get to, but go ahead, Matt.
I paid $15 for 18 eggs.
That's ridiculous. I'm sorry. You can't eat eggs, man. I mean,
And I'm bulking right now. So and that's my favorite thing is just make steak and eggs, and like literally the not expensive ones, the styrofoam big pack of
like the
18,
Eggland's base. Yeah,
$15.
you're not getting
Yeah.
painted eggs. You're not getting rainbow. Yeah,
I mean, I might as
gluten-free
well,
eggs. Yeah,
shit, at that price.
100%. I can't believe it. I mean, it's bad here, but when some of my friends in New York sent me some photos from the grocery store, and I couldn't believe people paying. I'm sure people are paying more than this, but like $12 again for like the bargain bin eggs. But look, I want to just like look at this really quick on this Gulf of America thing, and then we'll go to Kylie. This is from some polling pretty recently, a couple weeks ago. Americans sour on some of Trump's early moves, January 28th, and I want people to recognize this because I think there are going to be some kind of interesting things that are going to have to happen in Trump world. Support for Trump's executive orders and proposed actions. Any requirements that government employees report gifts or investments. 77% oppose. Renaming the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of Mexico. 70% oppose. Only 25% like. Jan 6 protesters, 62%. I mean, we can go through some more of these if we'd like to in a second. But I think it's really notable that a lot of this kind of like absurd Trump stuff is not even popular, even seemingly with his own base, right? Even with Republican voters, most people find these kind of things not just, oh, I don't care, right? Like I actually think that this is a bad or obnoxious thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, these are, and there's a quite a good chunk of things that people don't fuck with there.
I mean, we can talk about this, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later in the show because we're going to talk a little more about Doge and Musk and the relationship here. But yeah, I think these kind of things are really important. We're actually going to this should be a little bit of a poll heavy episode where we'll be talking about some Texas ones too in a little bit. But yeah, new tariffs on goods from Canada, 60% oppose. Ending birthright citizenship, 59% oppose. Ending federal efforts to hire women and racial minorities, 59% oppose. Withdrawing from the Paris Accords, 56% oppose. Tariffs on Mexico, 55% oppose. Tariffs in general, 54% oppose. Interestingly, delaying the ban of TikTok in the United States, 52% oppose that.
Well, yeah, like the Republicans were massively supportive of
Yeah.
going after TikTok until recently.
But yeah, I mean, look, I think this is something that's really important to remember, and because it's easy to lose track of this when you see the way that the Democrats respond to these kind of problems. Is that Trump and Trumpism is not popular, and this has actually been a kind of running theory or argument from Left Reckoning, held before the election, but especially since Kamala Harris bungled $1 billion and let these kind of people back into office. Is that their stuff is not particularly popular. In fact, a lot of people don't like it at all. And if there was any kind of real semblance of an opposition, we would be in a much different situation right now. But it is because of the way that so many people feel disillusioned from politics, unrepresented by the Democratic Party, that has allowed Donald Trump to get into power and do a lot of damage. The thing about Trump is it would be great if it was just 4 years of Gulf of America bullshit, right? And then renaming military bases, right? Bringing back Bragg, renaming whatever that mountain back in Alaska that they renamed was after McKinley.
Did you know it's not even about the Confederate brag? It's about some like World War One brag. They didn't even
bizarre.
rename it. Like, what the fuck are you doing?
No, they can't. I mean, because again, like the kind of people who are really into this kind of stuff is not a popular constituency. And it would be great if this is what was going on. But instead, what we are seeing is like, as we're going to talk about with Kylie in just a couple minutes, very serious assaults on people's human rights, right? A very, very serious potential assault on Gaza. Severe damage to our ability to just do basic medical research via, RFK's pilfering of the scientific community, along with, all the insanity of Elon Musk. But the fact of the matter is that if you're looking for hope, right, as we were talking about with Grace Blakely recently, right, everyone wants to, burrow into their little holes and cry. The reality is that they're not popular, right? And there is a way to build out of this. There is a way to build an alternative to it. And first and foremost is going to take embracing a very, very serious American populism, engaging in class politics, and rejecting the toxic brand of Democratic Party politicians, and also not tailing people like Trump, because Trump is, I mean, I think we're close to it, right? I mean, what's Trump's approval ratings like already are not very impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. And people, the folks who are kind of holding out for maybe a worker MAGA policy are kind of bailing on maybe the plausibility of that project at this point.
Yeah. Well, we'll have plenty of time to talk about it. I'll just say, the Gulf of America stuff I find to be very embarrassing. In the Texas legislature, Matt, we have all these guys who are just basically copying the homework of Trump. So anytime Trump does something outrageous, particularly these like symbolic things, some jackass just files a similar bill. It's truly embarrassing. I think to rename something like this, just in a way that like this is not even like reflective of a history. It's not like woke or DEI that this is called the Gulf of Mexico. In fact, it's like recognizing a very, very important history. Like that's what Sam Houston called this, right? And I find it just really disgusting that people in 2025 are so revisionist and have no kind of sanctity for any of these kind of things. I just find it tremendously embarrassing.
Yeah, I think it's a Mo Kachik of I should figure out a great writer. I think with David American Prospect, but I don't quote me 100% on that. But pointed out like them going after mapping, like in Oregon, like we're mapping our territory, and because it just mentions like DEI. What's fascinating is like the way that they use DEI is like any sort of contract that touches stuff. What's actually in a contract with regards to stuff is loyalty oaths to Israel, literally.
Yeah.
Anti-BDS legislation in all these states, and we're having that conversation. We're not having that conversation.
No, definitely not. Well, folks, we're going to come back. Matt, do you want to introduce this interview for us?
Yeah, first, this is Kylie Cheung. She's a staff writer at Jezebel. I open with asking her to react to a image of Luka Doncic, and I just shared that if I could find it. Oh crap! I have too many tabs open. It's this. Where is this damn image? Shoot. I got it.
I have it
Well,
for us. It's
do you?
yeah. Just give me 1 second. I mean, I'm pulling it from the most insane website ever. So excuse whatever this is. This is not an endorsement of.
I got it. Here we go.
Okay.
There we go. And this is another ambush in Dallas T-shirt. Luka Doncic. There you can see. I don't see that the numerology doesn't quite line up. I guess 2, 25, 11, 22, 63, LBJ. There. That's just.
God,
didn't want you guys left out of that. So.
No, it's great, and it was really a wonderful opportunity to speak with Kylie. She's a must read and follow if you aren't already.
Yeah, if we don't have her Substack in the description, I'll add it there in a second. But really, I talk about this with like Luke Savage, and I think I even mentioned this, but like people that do this kind of reporting day in and day out and contextualize things for people are extremely valuable and willing to put their names to it. And they should be supported probably more than I'm not a writer, but I don't hear like that. It doesn't pay as well as YouTubers, frankly, which isn't saying much. So here we go. Welcome, Left Reckoners. I'm Matt Leck. With me, as always, David Griscom. Hello, David.
Hey, friend, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, and joining us is Kylie Cheung, staff writer at Jezebel, also author of several books, most recent being Survivor, Injustice, State-Sanctioned Abuse, Domestic Violence, and The Fight for Bodily Autonomy, which I read last year during the run-up to the election, and also the forthcoming Coercion, Surviving, and Resisting Abortion Bans. Kylie, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I always forget how long the title of Survivor is, beyond that. But yeah, thank you for having me.
And I've said this before when we've had staff writers on, like Luke Savage, but folks who watch this format of things should really support their staff writers, like Kylie at kyliecheung.substack.com, because really they are kind of the lifeblood for all of this stuff that any informed show is talking about. Kylie's pretty much in the news packet every single day with an article on all this abortion stuff and assault on reproductive rights. Before we get to that, though, I want to share with you something that you've also written on, Kylie, is Luka Doncic. And there's a little piece of merchandise here, and I want your guys' reaction to it. It is...
Oh, Jesus.
It is a picture of Luka Doncic and John F. Kennedy, and there's a connection between the LBJs there, and it says another ambush in Dallas. Kylie, your reaction?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of like merch and like memes kind of in that vein, and I definitely think there's a lot of connections there. There's a lot of serious questions about corruption and transparency, and it's all happening in the same place. So, I think it's fair to start asking some questions. I definitely have questions. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I want to know if George de Mohrenschildt was in Miriam Adelson's Rolodex, but, we don't want to get too far afield into my JFK assassination things. Kylie, you have a number, I mean, like I said, you have like 3 pieces a day over at Jezebel. The first thing I want to ask you about is these pardons of the Jan 6ers were really big news, and even people like J.D. Vance were sort of like trying to distance himself from a bit. But there's another set of pardons that Trump issued that we should also be extremely concerned about. Can you tell us about those?
Yeah, so, I think within days of Trump taking office, what he did was issue pardons to 23 anti-abortion activists who faced federal charges on the FACE Act, which is a law. It was signed by Bill Clinton in, I believe, 1994, and that was, after a period of especially heightened anti-abortion violence targeting clinics. And so what that law does is, it essentially prohibits protesters from, like, obstructing access to those clinics. And, there's been a lot of criticism in recent years that law in itself has obviously failed to protect a lot of clinics and patients and, like, just in general, people in that space from anti-abortion violence. But, now, sorry, I'm getting off track. But essentially, so those individuals that Trump issued pardons to had faced charges on that law, and several of them had been physically violent toward clinic staff and patients. In 2020, there was a case, I think a handful of those particular protesters were involved in obstructing a clinic in DC, in which one of them, I believe, pushed or tripped a nurse and she sprained her ankle. They also pushed a pregnant woman to the ground while she was experiencing, I believe, labor, or it was labor contractions. But yeah, essentially, or Trump pardoned those individuals and said that they were peaceful protesters, and he did that at the same time that he issued an his Justice Department issued a guidance essentially telling prosecutors to not enforce the FACE Act unless it's under quote unquote extraordinary circumstances involving death or serious bodily injury or arson. But, I think even then it would be fair to question whether they wouldn't come up with some reason at that point to still say that the law shouldn't be enforced. And I think, you drawing that connection between those pardons and the January 6th pardons is really important, because what we've actually heard from a lot of people who work at abortion clinics is when we first started seeing the photos and the faces of January 6th insurrectionists, many of them were familiar to these clinics because many of these people were protesting and being violent toward or harassing clinic staff and kind of using the same violent tactics, at these clinics that they were at the Capitol on January 6th. And so I think, there's definitely important connections there. And I think that the way this has happened kind of at the same time, the pardons of these protesters and also the DOJ's kind of new guidelines around the FACE Act. I think it just kind of speaks to how, I think that this is being very much understood as like the Trump administration effectively greenlighting violence against abortion clinics, against people working in this space. And, in recent years, we've seen really alarming increases in reported cases of violence toward abortion clinics, including stalking and harassment and arson even, and other forms. I think the National Abortion Federation has some really concerning statistics. Like I think there was a 538% increase from 2021 to 2022 in people obstructing clinic entrances. And, now these people are being encouraged to do that. And, I think it just is important to stress that, anti-abortion laws in themselves are like very violent because forced pregnancy is state violence. That just is the reality that has resulted in a lot of increases in maternal morbidities. And even we've seen at least several cases of abortion ban inflicted deaths. And that's just what we know of right now. I think that really is very much, it extends from the same well, I guess, of how terror and violence against clinics and kind of the state violence component of these laws are just deeply connected.
Yeah, it really brings to a culmination sort of an era of the assault on reproductive health that I sort of came up into. I remember living in Fargo, and the first time I was really aware of sort of pro-choice activism was people who would be wearing vests to help make sure people can get into the clinic that was there downtown Fargo for like the entire time I was in college. And that one had to move across the river into Minnesota now since the falling of Roe. But yeah, like that religious anti-choice psychos really like to harass people, and it's not a hypothetical threat of violence. This is a historical threat that we're dealing with. Let's move to the second issue here is these Texas abortion related travel for minors. You had a story, Texas abortion is forcing children under 12 to travel out of state for care.
Yeah, I think that this speaks to like a lot of the immediate data, like after obviously the Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health ruling, that was going to take some time to come in, but we knew, frankly, that it was going to be awful and just really heartbreaking, and that very much has been the case. And so I think, what we saw was the Texas Health Department kind of released some data that showed at least 105 minors had to travel out of state for abortion throughout 2023. And, that among those, there were at least six of those children were under 12 years old. And so we've heard from child welfare advocates who have stressed that, the majority of those 105 minors who had to travel out of state for abortion care were impregnated by sexual violence. And, everyone obviously in the youngest category, including specifically, that category of children under 12, obviously that was a result of sexual violence. And, I think that it's I don't even know. There are just no words for it, obviously. And, I think in 2021, we saw when Texas enacted the 6-week abortion ban, the one that's civilly enforced by, anyone can sue in the state, can sue anyone who helps someone or provides someone with abortion care for at least $10,000. That didn't have a rape exception. None of the abortion bans that are in place in Texas have rape exceptions. But I think in 2021, Greg Abbott was asked about that, and he pledged to simply eliminate rape, which, it's it's like an
Well,
appalling.
quote, he said, rape is a crime in Texas, is what his response to that was. And, it is really despicable when you actually see the results of this law, which everybody knew. But the way that these kind of politicians like lie, and, Abbott is, a real kind of lawyer figure, you know what I mean? Like, he loves to play up in those gray areas of law. And it's really despicable, frankly, for him to try to, weasel his way out of something that he's very much responsible for.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think, yeah, I think that specific, him saying it's a crime and this or that, like, it's just, there's so many layers to it that, like, I'll try to unpeel, but, like, I'm not going to get to everything. But it's just like, for one thing, most sexual violence, it's like, I think that a lot of right wingers, they kind of parrot that line because what they really want to do is just justify more funding for policing, and to kind of frame gender-based violence exclusively as like this
Sorry,
street-based
not to cut you off, but
crime.
just like at the same time, they're also not testing any of the rape kits all across the state of
Yeah,
Texas. It's like one of the worst in the country for that.
yeah, absolutely. Like it's a huge issue, and so it's just one of so many. But yeah, I mean, like in most of the time, it's perpetrated by someone or have some kind of relationship with, and like I mean, I think anyway, to the point of him saying that, I think there was some research that came out in January 2024 that kind of projected based on, existing data that tens of thousands of rape-induced pregnancies had happened since Dobbs, and the majority of them were in Texas. And yeah, and so, I think that this data about minors being forced to travel out of state for that care, and many of them being victims, speaks obviously for itself. Yeah.
It's ironic for Texas too. I don't want to, but like I remember that Ken Starr at Baylor. I don't know if you've seen this, Kylie. There's maybe I'll put it in a post, but there's an interview with Ken Starr. He was a big president of Baylor at the time, and he was basically ignoring emails about reporting campus sexual assaults, and he got basically like sued for it. I can't remember exactly the fallout, but really like egregious. And that brings us to something else you've written on, which is this sort of campus sexual assault red meat that Trump administration is throwing to folks. Can you just put that into context for people that somehow think that young men's lives are being ruined, like basically at the flip of a coin, if based on fake accusations, allegedly?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me see. Yeah, I think that, obviously these are the first days of his presidency, but he moved very quickly to reinstate, guidelines from his previous education department, which, there's a lot of reporting that shows that these guidelines were effectively written by men's rights activist groups. And a lot of them are kind of premised around this very central idea that, like, essentially, like, Title IX reports or reports of campus sexual assault are kind of entirely manufactured to ruin young men's lives or whatnot. But, actual data shows that, like, suspensions or expulsions involving these reports are incredibly rare. And not only that, but I don't know, like this, like, I mean, there's this incredible book called On the Wrong Side that by Dr. Nicole Badera that I really recommend. But essentially what it shows is just that there's so much paranoia among these like higher institutions of higher education about like seeming like they're victimizing young men, that if anything they overcorrect in a lot of ways, and they make it incredibly difficult for a student who's reporting sexual assault, who usually just wants reasonable accommodations to not have to maybe live next to someone who raped them or go to class with someone who raped them, very reasonable accommodations, that just these schools make it incredibly difficult for them to seek those out, all while they accord pretty significant like benefits and accommodations on the student who is accused, because they're so deeply afraid of being appearing unfair. And I think that there are a lot of different pieces of Trump's Title IX sexual assault policies that he reinstated. Hold on, sorry, I just ate. But what was I saying? Yeah, that include like letting accused students like cross-examine someone who they probably did sexually assault. there's that. And I mean, just in general, like substantially lowering schools' liabilities to even, act on any of these sexual assaults. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different components to these policies. And, something that I think a lot of advocates have been stressing is the unfortunate reality, I mean, is that, these policies, Trump proposed them, or his education department proposed them in his first term in 2017. And even then, I mean, like at that point, schools kind of just started to take that as a green light to do nothing, because there isn't a lot, I guess, of a very, I don't know, there isn't very much like an enforcement component to a lot of these. So, just in general, over the years, there's a lot of these policies have kind of been in flux, and there hasn't been a lot of, I don't know, enforcement of them, no matter what. But I think, sorry, what I'm trying to say is, so that those rules technically took effect in 2020, but there was a lot of frustration among advocates because, during the Biden era, that was not a priority at all in terms of like actually repealing any of those policies. And if anything, I think we saw that those Title IX policies under Biden, which did scale back some aspects of Trump's sexual or campus sexual assault policies, that took effect like toward the end of 2024. But then immediately a court allowed most states to like essentially disregard that because I think Biden's Title IX policies added protections for trans students and queer students and pregnant students, and a court ruled that allowed states to essentially disregard that. And so, in effect, a lot of people did not experience like the Trump era campus sexual assault policies meaningfully being repealed at all because of, essentially failures of the Biden administration to really prioritize that. And that's true at the same time that, obviously what Trump is doing here is very much like throwing red meat at like the men's rights activists who have such influence over his administration. Sorry, but yeah.
No, I mean, I wanted to sort of ask you about that because, like, it's very notable. Not only Trump himself, but the people around him. Yeah. The cloud, let's say, of abuse. I mean, Stephen Miller, for example, is like somebody who people, know and is very influential. I mean, he really got his start at the Duke lacrosse scandal back in the day. People might not know this, but he was a student at the time, and he was very worked up about this case. Right? This is something that's like very deep within the Trump administration, not just with Trump and his kind of well-known history, but people around him. And I'm just curious, Kylie, what you kind of think about, this aspect of the people around Trump and his administration, and then the actions of the Trump administration on these kind of issues.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't I didn't know that about Stephen Miller, but I mean, not to be rude, but just by looking at him, there is not a lot of stuff that would surprise me about.
I'll tell you, if people don't know, like the more, I mean, you don't really want to spend too much time thinking about this man, but the more you learn about his past, like a lot of things make sense. Anyway.
Oh, I'm sure. But yeah, I mean, Trump is like a jury recognized him as a sexual assailant. So there's no like alleged, he is a legally recognized sexual assailant and like serially accused of rape and other sexual violence. And so that's why it's just obviously so disgusting. I mean, I'm sure you saw that like photo op last week where he's just surrounded by little girls and is like signing that transphobic legislation while, essentially what that legislation does is like, it's just like rooted in this conservative obsession with children's genitals, which is incredibly alarming and gross and violent and predatory. And, again, like that photo op was just disgusting for many reasons. But, I would say foremost among them is his own record of abuse. But, to your point, like he first nominated Matt Gaetz as Attorney General, and obviously that didn't pan out, but just the fact that he did that, I think it speaks volumes about, the message that they're trying to send here, which I think is very much like in 2018, Trump himself said it's a scary time for young men. And, it's just, I think so much of his reelection is like rooted in like backlashes to any amount of like feminist progress. And I think that there's a lot of like, I don't know. I think it was very intentional who he appointed. I mean, RFK Jr. obviously is accused of sexual assault, is accused of, at the very least, emotional abuse toward his ex-wife, who ultimately ended up taking her life because of different financial and emotional abuse that he seems to have subjected her to. And then, so then there's also Matt Gaetz, and then Elon Musk. I mean, this kind of personally pisses me off, but obviously there's so many different reasons to like hate him, but like I just don't think it gets enough attention that he like is accused of like sexually abusing a flight attendant. And you know, if you read these other reports, like a lot of his conduct with employees, like I don't know, trying to convince them to like have his children, all of these different things, like it's sexual harassment. It's incredibly predatory. It's like exploiting a power dynamic, and it's incredibly gross. And it seems that there is a pattern of that behavior, and now he's essentially running this administration. And you know, I think that it just can't be ignored that these men are serially accused predators. And you know, I think that very much shows in terms of the consequences of the policies they're enacting. Like you know, I amidst all of this funding, this circus around like federal funding right now, a lot of rape crisis centers across the country, a lot of anti-sexual violence organizations are just reporting that they're not getting funding that they were supposed to have received on February 1st. And they're not getting any direction about why that is, when that's coming. And the consequences really are life or death, because, you know, they're having to cut staff. They might have to like reduce hours of like when shelters or hotlines are operational. And we've been seeing for years, just because of different policy changes and how like funding that essentially, yeah, that is supposed to come from the Justice Department to, you know, these different local and state level programs. It's been declining a lot over the years. And, you know, again, the consequences really are life or death. And so, you know, all of that is kind of compounding between this and the different like funding cuts from the federal government because of Elon Musk's claims that he's like looking for waste or whatnot. But we know that all he's really doing is just letting a bunch of really creepy 20-year-olds just kind of run wild and harvesting our data and cutting anything that ever really did anything good from the federal government, really.
Yeah, you know, you allude to all those different stories of Elon, and with Trump, it's just like, how, I don't know how you let your daughter do a photo op around a guy that the grab him by the pussy tape. If people forget that, that is such a clear, basically capturing of rape culture on tape. And it's dead to rights that he participates in that type of activity. To me, I can't imagine having that kind of imagination when you haven't been living life that way. Not to mention all the times he's been in court about stuff and accused of stuff like that. And you know, they want to see that they're doing something for young girls with this trans stuff, I guess, as they're attacking young women, because young women are the most young women particularly are the most affected by this abortion ban stuff. And so they're really attacking their rights as they purport to save young men from being under attack. It's just, I just think if you're really stupid if you don't think that these guys are A, attacking rights, and B, like abusers themselves.
I was just going to note on that, just like, because it's really infuriating, right? When you talk about the kind of made up controversy about, you know, men in quote women's bathrooms, right? And this kind of like moral panic, panic that the Republicans and the right have put across the country, when that's the kind of like made up hypothetical situation that they've like, you know, moved so quickly on. And then the stuff that you're writing about, reporting on, like literally children are dying, because of this abortion ban, right? People are suffering because of the lack of access to healthcare that comes when people, you know, sort of hide and are in the shadows, right? So like, there's one thing that is actually harming people, like demonstrably, and there's another thing that has been sort of made up to target another like minority group. I mean, it really is beyond just like, oh, they're, you know. It really is just such the height of cynicism, the way that they kind of use, you know, panic about like safety of women when this administration and the administrations associated with it have been waging this prolonged war against women in this country.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, you know, I think to a point that you're making, you know, I think it's just, you know, this line about, I guess, pushing this anti-trans agenda for quote unquote women's safety, like that very much has been what they're invoking on that front. And then, you know, we're also very much seeing that increasingly with like their anti-immigrant agendas when they pass these bills. I mean, like, you know, kind of invoking the Lake and Riley Act, which, you know, survivor justice groups and immigrant justice groups point out that her death, her very like tragic death, was an act of femicide. And like femicide, or homicides and violence targeting women, it's like, the reality is it's endemic in this country, and it's not going to be solved by I don't know, just by like detaining and deporting immigrants like in en masse, because it's just like they don't act on like gun safety when 70 women are killed by an intimate partner every month, or women die because they can't access shelters or hotlines, and they die because they can't access abortion care or escape an abusive relationship from that, or if they're having serious complications from pregnancy. But I think what we're really seeing is these bills that will be introduced kind of in the name of protecting women from supposed violence from immigrants, even though we know that that primarily comes from intimate partners and citizens, even though obviously they don't care about those facts because they just want to expand the mass deportation apparatus. But yeah, essentially these bills are justified that. But in reality, not only is that obviously not what they're going to achieve, but what we see is that these bills actively harm survivors if they're undocumented themselves, where it gives their abusers, more power over them to threaten to report them for this crime or that, or even like falsely accuse them of abuse, because that is a very common tactic in abusive situations. And it just increases the power that abusers have over their victim when, they could more easily, get them deported or
I mean, this is a party. I'm sorry. This
Yeah.
is a party that there's a non-insignificant portion now that want to make it harder to get a divorce in the United States of America.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you talk about control and keeping people in abusive situations.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there's several states where, you can't finalize a divorce while you're pregnant. And, there's overlap between those states with those policies and banning abortion. And it's just incredibly dangerous.
Speaking of people's lives being ruined, you have another story, and this is tied to a broader subject on abortion pill criminalization, but New York doctor and Louisiana mother indicted over abortion pills. Can you talk to people about that?
Yeah, I think ever since the Dobbs ruling, there's a handful of states that have or states where abortion is legal, that have enacted what are called shield laws, which protect doctors and abortion providers from, who provide abortion care to someone from a state where abortion is banned, from facing legal threats, whether they provide that care to someone who travels from another state to receive it, or, if they mail medication abortion across state lines. And, those laws have been instrumental because, there's still obviously very, very many barriers to getting care, but, being able to receive abortion pills by mail has been such a lifeline for people in states where it's banned. And now, I think anti-abortion state officials are very much aware of that and are trying to essentially test the waters with challenging these shield laws. And, first in December, we saw the Texas Attorney General sue, the same New York doctor who's involved in this, for sending pills to a Dallas woman. And, something incredibly disturbing that we learned last month from the Washington Post reporting was that the Texas Attorney General's office is reportedly like actively recruiting men to, reveal their partner's abortions to the state, especially if a doctor from out of state mailed those pills, because they want to get these lawsuits going, because they want to challenge these shield laws and essentially stop pills from being.
And I'm sure they feel confident with the Supreme Court they might be able to get away with that, right?
Yeah, and so that's happening in Texas. But the case with Louisiana, this is not a civil suit. It's like these are criminal charges, and the provider in New York has been indicted, and New York obviously is very much trying to. The shield law does protect her, and the state has been very supportive of her. But then, in Louisiana at the same time, we're seeing that the mother who sought those abortion pills is facing those charges, and there are no protections for her, obviously. And, how the state is trying to spin it is that this mother coerced her teenage daughter to take those pills, but they are not providing any evidence that that's the case. And, we keep seeing this line. This line it's been used to justify like so-called abortion trafficking laws, where, I think last year, the Senate blocked a bill that would have codified, the constitutional right to interstate travel, including for abortion. And, Republican senators said it's because this law is about letting adults traffic minor or engage in abortion trafficking and take minors across state lines. Well, no, it's like actually like access to abortion is crucial for people who might be in abusive situations. Otherwise, they're just entrapped, in that abusive situation for a long time. But instead, we're seeing, this co-optation of like pretending that, banning abortion or further restricting access to pills or this or that are about protecting people. And, like in Louisiana, they became the first state last year to enact a law criminalizing possession of abortion pills in most cases. And that bill was introduced, what was used to justify that was, this very tragic case of a man putting abortion pills in his wife's food without her consent, which obviously is, horrible. And at the same time, there's no reason that should justify banning access to abortion pills broadly, especially when like there was no need for additional legislation because it's already like putting drugs in someone's, like drugging someone is already like a crime. Like this was just about, targeting this crucial resource and making it look like it's about caring about abuse victims.
Man, I mean, how dishonest it is, and how they basically are turning the worst men in Texas into like a volunteer community watch to snitch on women is just insanely dystopian. Kylie, is there anything else? Oh, go ahead, David.
I'm sorry. I just want to add like a little context on the Texas thing too. Is that like one thing that's really horrible about all of this on top of like the suffering? You look at the polling. You look at all the polling in the state, and everybody says we don't like this. We don't like this law. Now Texas has a fair gradation of like when and where people think that people should be having abortions. But the support for this kind of extreme dystopian ban on abortion in Texas is not supported by anybody. I mean, I think I've seen polling that 80% of Texans believe that there should be an exception for rape and incest, right? I think it's nearly 50% of Texans want to see the law significantly changed. And it's one of these things where like you see all of these people in this state wanting one thing, and the government not only is not like answering the will of the people, like they're doubling down on this kind of thing. So it's scary, one, because of like the horror, and then the kind of realization is like we don't even really effectively have like a democratically like representative government that's doing this. So it's not even like, oh, all my neighbors are doing this. It's like, oh, this like government that's sitting on top of the rest of the state is just sort of following the whims of their mega donors and all of these kind of anti-abortion freaks to the detriment of literally millions and millions of people.
Yeah, that's such an important point. And like, sorry, there was like one last thing I wanted to say that like kind of connects to that. But yeah, to your point in terms of these policies not really coming from, just incredibly unpopular and no one like undemocratically. Yeah, so since everything with like the Louisiana case, like Pam Bondi, who was just confirmed as Attorney General, she just last week went and met with Louisiana law enforcement officials involved in that case, as well as the governor and Attorney General. And they specifically asked her for quote unquote consistency on like the policies in terms of mailing abortion pills across state lines. And, a very serious concern going into this second Trump term was that his DOJ would enforce something called the Comstock Act of 1873, which bars like the mailing of obscene materials and just classifying medication abortion or abortion related supplies as obscene materials. And so it's incredibly concerning that she's working that she's like partnering in some capacity with Louisiana on this case, and that they are asking her effectively to ban it seems mailing abortion pills. And so that's definitely something to watch, especially as that was a big part of Project 2025. And it seems she's interested in working with them on that.
And if free speech hadn't been debased by basically a bunch of opportunists for the last 5 years, people would understand the Comstock Act was literally the same law that they used to ban Ulysses by James Joyce. And I'm pretty sure Oscar Wilde books like 100 years ago. Like, it's ridiculous to cite it in this context. Kylie, you have a book coming out, Pluto Press, Coercion, Surviving, and Resisting Abortion Bans. We'll also put your Substack link to that. Anything else before we let you go?
No, I don't think so. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was great having her on the program.
Yeah. Like I said, I read probably one of her pieces once a day, because, and it'd be nice if it was more of the Luca or Joel Embiid fun stuff, and not really.
Yeah,
um,
she knows ball. She knows ball too.
Absolutely. I was curious why she's so Philly centric, because but we didn't really. I thought we were going to make a really big Philadelphia show with our boys from Whole Foods, and but we dodged it somehow. I don't know. This maybe it was sabotaged, but I mentioned Ken Starr in that, and so I uploaded that. We have this Ken Starr video. I
Do you need
think.
me to play it? I can play it if you want me
Oh,
to.
if you see it, yeah, if you
Yeah.
can play it. This is Ken Starr, who died 2 years ago. Rest in piss. Who, he led the impeachment. He was the legal sort of inquisitor of Bill Clinton's sex life for the '90s. I'm not a defender of Bill Clinton, but that's probably not what I would have went after him for, even though it was entirely inappropriate what he was doing. Um, Nonetheless, here's Ken Starr installed as, I believe, president and chancellor of Baylor University. When we talk about Texas, getting what do you say? Rape is already illegal there. Well, here's a good example of maybe the way that certain Republicans like to
It's
police it.
this email sent from a rape victim to a number of people with the subject line, "I was raped at Baylor," that's been part of the debate during the sexual assault investigation. The victim, whose identity was concealed, appeared on ESPN's Outside the Lines on Wednesday. She sent the email in the fall of 2015. Was concealed, appeared on ESPN's Outside the Lines on Wednesday. She sent the email in the fall of 2015 about a rape that happened in 2009. A few hours after that interview aired, we met with Starr at the president's home on the Baylor campus. One of our questions was about that email. What about the victim that came forward saying that she had personally sent you an email and Art Briles an email saying in the subject line that she was raped at Baylor? Did you ever see that email?
I honestly may have. I'm not denying that I saw it.
But it's what happens moments later that brings the interview to a halt. What you can't see during this interview is my news director behind me. You also can't see a woman named Mary Spate, who asked my boss to promise not to use that portion of the interview. When he says no, she interrupts our interview.
Well, I want to point out, I need to talk to Jen Starr, to just start.
Okay.
I need to talk to you, sir.
Okay, do you ask great questions?
Okay, great. Can I ask you one more question?
I have got to talk to you.
Okay.
Okay.
Spate was introduced to our crew as a longtime family friend. What we've since learned is she has a long resume in crisis management. She's a communications specialist, owns her own firm, and was once a director of media relations at the White House for President Reagan. She also coached Starr while he gave testimony to impeach Bill Clinton. After a few minutes away, the two returned.
She needs to ask you that question again. Whether you do it on camera or not, it's up to you. I just want to make sure it doesn't end up misedited.
Okay. We ask Starr again, and he answers, but turns to Spate, apparently for coaching.
All I'm going to say is I honestly have no recollection of that.
Of seeing any email?
Is that okay?
Don't look at me, look at her.
Then Starr answers again.
I honestly have no recollection of seeing such an email, and I believe that I would remember seeing such an email. The president of the university gets lots of emails. I don't even see a lot of the emails that come into the office of the president. I have no recollection of it. None.
While Starr calls for transparency and openness, it appears his message is still being tightly controlled.
Yeah, well, shout out to that news team there. Always
One of the best.
grab.
Yeah, one of the best 120 or 180 seconds of news that I think I've seen in the last 10 years. And I think really important when we talk about these politicians, that they are actors being coached
Oh yeah.
in a large sense by some of the worst vampires out there, saying, here's how you have to talk about that email about your responsibilities to have rapes investigated at the campus you're nominally in charge of. And he's just looking for cues, man. Like that, it's kind of chilling.
Yeah. No, for real. Well, I mean, we'll be talking about coaching and and ways that people are trying to frame certain arguments in just a second. Matt, I did want to, before we talk about this Musk thing, I wanted to just go over a little bit of this stuff with this Whole Foods Union. We're again for folks who tuned in for that, apologies. We had the interview and it just significant technical issues with the recording itself. We're trying to see if we can save it, if we can fix it. Hopefully we can do that. If not, maybe sometime in the near future, reschedule another conversation. But this is a really important story. So even though I wish we could have the people involved in it, telling it like they did to us this morning, I did want to make sure that people are up to date on this. So first and foremost, the good news: historic victory for workers in Philadelphia. People who have been engaged in a long time union effort won their election, right? And they overcame ridiculous union busting, all of the kind of classic tactics and attempts to stifle, which is a pretty simple proposition. Do you want to have more power at work versus less? Right? Most people say yes to that. Now, companies know that that's not good for them. So they do things like mandatory meetings. They do things like hiring all kinds of consultants, and they also do things like effectively trying to cordon off certain parts of a company. Say, hey, we'll give you a raise, we'll give you this protection. Don't risk it because you'll lose it if we find out you vote the other way. Right? These are all kind of things. Many of them are effective, like are by the books illegal. Though we always know that companies try to get away with a lot more. Anyway, they win. It's huge. This is an Amazon-owned company. This is a part of this massive momentum against Amazon by people who work at these companies owned by them. Is a huge victory. Now, this is something that affects everybody, not just in the general sense of solidarity, but because Jeff Bezos, trying to take advantage of what's going on with the Trump administration, is now trying to use this election to attack not just this union victory, but frankly, in my opinion, unions across the board. Amazon Whole Foods cites Trump's NLRB purge as grounds for rejecting union win. This is from CNBC. Whole Foods Amazon has asked the NLRB to overturn a union victory at a Philadelphia store, pointing to President Donald Trump's recent ouster of top officials. Trump last week fired NLRB chair Gwynne Wilcox and the agency's top lawyer. Wilcox firing leaves just two remaining members of the five-member NLRB panel, which already had two vacancies at the time she was dismissed. With only two sitting members on the board, the NLRB lacked the necessary quorum to issue decisions on a labor dispute. Now, I want to note a couple things, right? First of all, the action of Trump pushing out a member of the NLRB is totally illegal, right?
Right.
Let's also add to the fact that the Biden administration failed to stand up and put people on the NLRB was a dereliction of duty and was a very, very clear moment, as we covered on the show, right, Matt? Of
Harris failing.
Of Harris failing, right? So we've been talking about the way that the Biden administration failed, but also specifically Kamala Harris, right? And the people around her who also, just like Elon Musk, just like Jeff Bezos, want to see unions weakened, right? So this is a two-pronged attack on unions by Kamala Harris and the Democratic Party, and now by Donald Trump and his cohort of billionaires, right? So all of this stuff is BS and is an attempt to muddy the water around very, very, very settled law in this country. Now, this is going to be a big fight. It's going to be a really important fight, and we'll be covering it as much as we can. It was really great speaking, to the workers involved in this effort. I highly suggest people go, just to keep up to date with everything that's going on. Go on Instagram and follow Philly food workers. I believe that's at Philly Whole Foods workers for people to be able to follow, so you can keep up to date with what's going on there. And we'll put links below after as well.
Yeah, go give them a follow.
Yeah. So anyways, we hope we'll be able to get the full extent of that interview out soon. But if not, we'll certainly be covering this as much as possible. Now, Matt, I want to talk a little bit about Musk, and it sucks. I really, it's one of those things I wish we didn't have to. But this is somebody who is fundamentally, wielding way too much power for any individual, but specifically for an individual with as many conflicts as he has. And let's just get into some of this video from earlier today. I don't know if you've seen this, but this is Elon Musk acting very dopey in the White House.
Everyone's very quiet, by the way. So if people don't.
And by the way, I'm not a medical doctor, but I'll tell you, this guy looks like he's somebody who might be on something. I can't say for sure. That's just my opinion looking at this.
Yeah. I mean, the amazing thing is, like, I think people are right to suspect that Trump would get annoyed by him, but I think they're undervaluing how much Elon has given to Trump in just contributions. And that does buy something. And I think
Who's
we
quiet?
just keep that in mind.
Your detractors, Mr. Musk.
I have to what?
Including a lot of Democrats.
I have detractors?
You do, sir.
I don't believe it.
Say that you're orchestrating a hostile takeover of government and doing it in a non-transparent way. What's your response to that criticism?
Well, first of all, you couldn't ask for a stronger mandate from the public.
And I'll just say,
could.
just because one, you could, but also I don't remember seeing that name on my ballot when I went to vote here in Texas. Maybe it was different in South Africa or in California, but it wasn't here, right? So, like, already just the way that he's merging himself with Trump, I think people need to be very careful about how you let this guy get away with this kind of slippage.
And this is the what the conservatives like to call the bigotry of low expectations. Trump, for the first time in 20 years, secured a popular vote for Republicans. It wasn't necessarily a massive one. It was just the first time that happens in our system. And frankly, there's a bunch of freaks who have been waiting for that too, frankly, because it does mean something to, I think, how corporate America reacts to these sorts of things. So, but you could ask for a bigger mandate. I'm pretty sure Barack Obama had and squandered a bigger mandate.
Voted, we have a majority of the public voting for President Trump. We won the House, we won the Senate.
Whoa.
The people voted for major government reform. There should be no doubt about that. That was on the campaign. The president spoke about that at every rally. The people voted for major government reform, and that's what the people are going to get. They're going to get what they voted for. And a lot of times, people that don't get what they voted for, but in this presidency, they are going to get what they voted for, and that's what democracy is all about.
That's about all the bloviating I could take there. Look, I mean, it's frustrating, it's disgusting, but it's also the reality that this person is being given unprecedented access to personal information of yours, to sensitive parts of the government. But honestly, like, the privacy thing's one thing. I mean, this is somebody who, in any democracy that still had a sense of itself, right? A democracy being a government of the people, by the people, for the people, would not allow the richest person in the world to just get their dirty little hands all over our system of government. It's truly embarrassing for the country. Now, we're going to get into some of the conflicts here, some of the reasons that he's involved. But I mean, Matt, what do you make of the Musk show, right? Like, a lot of people have been wanting to see a kind of fallout between Trump and Musk. And I'm just curious, as a keen observer of this, Matt, like, what your read is on a potential rift between the two of them.
I mean, I think that was wishful thinking based on personalities, and that isn't the ultimate. Personalities aren't the ultimate deciding factor, I don't think, in politics. And billions of dollars.
Yeah,
there's been so much money spent by all these different billionaires on this guy. I mean, Elon to his to hundreds of millions of dollars, and that's ultimately who Trump is comfortable with. It's those sorts of folks. And so I think, at some point, maybe will Elon wear out his welcome? Maybe. But I even, I do think it is, it's kind of shocking that it's Elon, I got to say, and not some sort of like Michael Bloomberg type of figure or something like that. Like, he changed his name to Harry Balls.
Yeah, I know. I mean, again, somebody who might be ingesting a few things. for sure. Now, I think it is very likely that there might be some kind of internal conflict, right? I think that one thing, Matt, about why is it Musk versus any other kind of big billionaire or something like that, is because Elon Musk has a lot of time on his hands. A lot of those other guys, they might actually do a little bit more at their companies than just sort of talk about how many hours at work that they're engaged in, right? So Musk seems to have a lot of time. I mean, I've heard Trump say in interviews like, I don't understand how he has so much time to be in Washington, D.C. and still run his companies. Just for anyone who is keeping score and wondering, all of these years when Business Insider would interview Elon Musk and he would say, oh, I just work. I just would never ending work. Yeah, the fact that he's been parading around Washington, D.C. for the past 2 months and then was just fucking off in Florida, after Trump won the election, might show you about how engaged he is into the day-to-day running of these many companies. Now, but I want to talk about a theory, and a few people I've heard sort of put this up, and I think that it's actually pretty novel, and I think that it rings true to me in a way, is that Musk. Why is Trump allowing Musk to be such a face of this administration? Right? I mean, Doge is the thing. We're not saying Trump. We're not talking about Trump. We're talking about Doge, right? Which is Elon Musk's childish government destruction program. Well, I think that there's an aspect to this where it's perfect for Trump because if all of this works out, the Trump administration got to do it, but also having somebody who's a very public face of a program like this, of these kind of things, makes it really easy if Musk becomes more and more unpopular in the future to say, "Oh, I never really liked that guy. He kind of stuck around." And Musk being probably one of the most unlikable and uncharismatic figures in front of a camera. Probably will help a lot if that happens. But again, I think that it's probably wishful thinking that it's necessarily going to happen. But it's a kind of perfect move for the Trump administration because hey, if it works out and everybody's happy and the markets are happy, great. If people get upset about it, it wasn't Trump, right? It was these terrible people around Trump who forced him to work with Musk.
And that's why you have senators go along with it. In a way, it's sort of why a corporation would hire McKinsey to basically give them a rationale for doing sort of things that might be unpopular if it comes from the just head of the company itself. And yeah, but I can't get over like this National Institutes of Health thing.
Yeah,
North Dakota, 2 senators, John Hoeven, the banker son of a banker, and he's the smart one, Jim Cramer. Wait, Kevin Cramer. I get a mistake with the CNBC guy.
And the former Spartacist, you know that?
Oh, yeah, that's right, yeah. No, Kevin Cramer, just a big fucking idiot. I mean, truly, like sub Tuberville. And nonetheless, University of North Dakota in Grand Forks punches way above its weight in biomedical sciences, is probably going to be the most disproportionately affected Midwestern university because it last year put out a press release saying, hey, we're punching way above our weight, and comparatively we're beating like Penn and all these other schools for these grants. And you know what, fuck them. I guess now they got to and all those grants go to like the workers and support staff. Fuck all those people. I guess everyone can just go to the drone program now, because I'm pretty sure Elon's not going to do anything to cut that stuff.
No, I mean, it's going to be really rich. I mean, once some of these people realize that, like, oh, it was like my federal job or like my state's economy that was getting a lot of federal money that they're coming at. I mean, look, they have no conception of what it is that they're doing. It is like it raised the whole system to the ground kind of moment. I mean, the tax stuff that we're hearing that they're going to put forward, you don't even need to have an inside. You don't even have to have like an inside window into the Republican Party to know the Republicans are about to push a massive tax break. And Elon Musk's and all their kind of cuts will do very, very little particularly because they're not interested in coming at the biggest and most bloated part of the American budget. But dude, I mean, like we could sit here and complain and be upset about this. I want us to think about why things are happening the way that they are. And you wanted to talk about, a very interesting thing, which is Musk's salute, right? Which I think is a very important part of this story, because this again is like Musk playing, trying to figure out what role he wants to play in this MAGA world. And it's going to be interesting to see, for example, if Trump, keeps him around, he's going to have to keep those people happy, right? As we talked about at the beginning of the program, people aren't particularly interested in this Gulf of America stuff, right? And how long the honeymoon lasts is still an open question. And so Musk is going to have to do a lot of work once people start to feel the pain of what he is doing. But you saw some interesting stuff about the salute, right?
Yeah, this is and I do bear in mind that one of the definitions of fascism is elites in sort of awkward relationship with rabid sort of
Yeah.
folks on the ground. So this isn't entirely to exculpate Musk from the idea of being a fascist or a Nazi or whatever, but I think this is interestingly put. So for folks who can't see it, let me see if I can make it a little bit bigger. So this guy Philip Lowe, he's some founder, tech guy. Says he knew Elon. I'm gonna skip to about halfway down here. Elon believes he's above everyone else. He used to think he worked on the most important problems. When I met him, he did not presume to be a technical person. He would be the first to say he lacked the expertise to understand certain data. That happened later. Now he believes he has all the solutions. All this talk about getting to Mars to, quote, maintain the light of consciousness, or about, quote, free speech absolutism, is actually BS knowingly feeds to people to manipulate them. Everything Elon does is about acquiring and consolidating power. That is why he likes far-right parties, because they are easier to control. That is why he gave himself $56 billion, which could have gone to the people who actually did the work and innovations he has taken credit for at Tesla. His lust for power is also why he did XAI and Neuralink, to attempt to compete with OpenAI and Neurovigil, respectively, despite being affiliated with them. Unlike Tesla and Twitter, he was unable to conquer those companies and tried to create rivals. I fired him with cause in December 2021 when he tried to undermine Neurovigil. That must be Philip's company here.
Mm-hmm.
Elon did 2 Nazi salutes. He did them for 5 main reasons. 1, he was concerned that the Nazi wing of the MAGA movement, under the influence of Steve Bannon, would drive him away from Trump somewhere in the Eisenhower office building rather than in the West Wing, which is where he wants to be. He was already feeling raw over the fact Trump did not follow his recommendation for Treasury Secretary, and that his Senate also did not pick his first choice. The Senate didn't pick his first choice. He was upset that number 2, he was upset that they had to go to Israel and Auschwitz to make up for agreeing with the Nazi sympathizer online, and wanted to reclaim his power, just like when he told advertisers to go fuck yourself. This has nothing to do with Asperger's. 3, there are some Jews he actually hates. Sam Altman is amongst them. 4, he enjoys a good thrill and knew exactly what he was doing. 5, his narcissistic self was hoping the audience would reflect his abject gesture back to him, thereby showing complete control and dominion over it, and increasingly his leverage over Trump. That did not happen. Bottom line, Elon is not a Nazi, but he did give 2 Nazi salutes, which is completely unacceptable. I honestly find that 100% persuasive.
Yeah, I mean, I think in particular, it's very clear that Elon Musk has a kind of general contempt for people, and does think that he's above the rest of us.
And the chameleon thing too, like, I think that guy, when he says he does this stuff to far right parties because he knows those people are easy to manipulate, I think this is also a guy who pretended to care about the environment for a while because of how it benefited him. Like, he is absolutely a shapeshifter. I mean, he does come from South Africa. I'm sure that is not that upbringing is not entirely foreign, and it comes from Canadians who moved to South Africa and like
Because they like
some
it.
sort of affinity with
Yeah,
it. So
yeah.
I don't want to downplay that at all, but I also think Elon is mainly for Elon on this sort of stuff.
And we're hoping to actually have some of our South African guests back on the program soon, to actually talk about the way that Musk is involving America in kind of in South African politics, which I think is no small thing. That Musk, the thing about Musk is that he has a contempt for democracy, but he also very much, I think, has a contempt for American democracy. Right? He does not like that this is a country that has equality for all groups of people. He does not like the fact that this is a diverse country, right? This is why he has such an affinity for the politics, for the people, for the movements that he has surrounded himself with. And the fact of the matter that he is trying to get the U.S. government to try to involve itself in the politics of South Africa really does show not just like a kind of paranoid mind, but one that very much like views his engagement in politics as a mission to try to crush kind of social justice for people, right? And South Africa is not something far off from his mind, right? Oh, part of his origin story. It's something that he regularly concerns himself with and is trying to concern this country with as well. But
Yeah, just one quick note on that. You'd be hard pressed to find the first statement Elon Musk or any statement Elon Musk really made about apartheid. The closest you can get is to him saying the reason he moved to America is he didn't think enforcing apartheid was a good use of his time, which is not exactly quoting Mandela. I'll
no.
say, even though it seems a little bit tongue in cheek, but.
So look, I think as far as I understand, I think that like look, and I could be we don't know, but I can see the logic in the kind of idea that like Musk is becoming a very public face of something that Trump is doing. That is probably going to have I mean, what Musk is trying to do, by the way, there's a lot of people who are primed to benefit to it, right? It's not all random willy nilly, right? Like there's some ideological stuff because I think that he has like psychological issues and wants the admiration of certain people. I also think that like a child, he sees something on TV and he sort of wants to replicate it. I think that he, is somebody who looks very weird, speaks very weird, and is very strange. Is very attracted to somebody like Millet in Argentina, and I think he saw that on the computer, and he wants to be like that. Right? There's some of this stuff that's very, very personal, right? But the fact of the matter is that personal analysis of these people is only going to get you so far. As everybody knows, like follow the money. The oligarchs and the billionaires who lined up behind Trump at the inauguration are all set up, to benefit greatly. One of the things, if you read financial press, one of the things that American capitalists are very excited about right now is this might be a new golden age of like mergers and acquisitions, right? To build what capital likes to build, by the way, which is monopolies. Right. So there's the big hope right now that more monopolies can be built, that all these pesky regulations will go away, that we can have this new bonanza, not of innovation, not of equality, hell, maybe not even probably growth for the rest of us, but a lot of personal pilfering that will go into the pockets of some of the most well-off people in the world, least of which is Elon Musk. So does Musk understand maybe that he is this kind of like risky face of this thing, that if it fails, he'll go down in flames personally, be condemned by Trump and MAGA? Who knows? Like this guy has more issues than I'm qualified to speak to. But even if he goes down and becomes persona non grata, right? There's plenty of things that Musk has benefited from. We talked about on this program, potentially Musk being able to use positions in the government to be able to maybe offload. I think David Dan wrote about this in the Prospect. Potentially offload some of his assets with a very, very steep discount on its tax. Who knows? Here are some things that are undeniably happening right now, and the New York Times actually did a very good write up on Elon Musk's businesses and where they stand to benefit here. Elon Musk's businesses empire scores benefits under Trump's shakeup. And we're getting into some of the many things that Musk has been engaged in, and we will. I suggest people read this piece. It's actually very good. But let's just look at this graph here, which is just going to highlight some of the many companies and potentials of benefit that Musk has. So, Department of Transportation. There are open regulatory battles or investigations into SpaceX for violations and fines against them.
Because his satellites keep burning up and re-entering our skies.
Yep. Same thing, Starbase review with the Department of Interior. There's a DOJ investigation into SpaceX. We've talked about that on this program. NLRB, which is going to be a frequent mention here. There's plenty of labor complaints at SpaceX. We also have at Tesla NLRB investigations, a lawsuit from the Equal Employment Opportunity Center. There are complaints from the CFPB. At Neuralink, the Department of Agriculture has an active investigation, and I wonder if that has anything to do with the monkey torturing that they've been doing there. At the SEC, there's an investigation. There's a lawsuit at X from the NLRB. There's a lawsuit from the Security and Exchange Commission. And Musk personally has issues with his security clearance with the Department of Defense. There are complaints about the FCC. We talked about this on this program, the way that he was spending money and was engaged in the 2024 election are extremely dubious and potentially fraudulent. But luckily for him, Trump won, and the Biden administration was very, very worried about acting upon the very likely illegal activities that Musk was engaged in. Look, we could go down this list here, but particularly Musk is facing investigations by the FAA. This is something that he's been talking about for his activities here in Texas, where he has wreaked havoc on the local community. But with the FAA in particular, Musk has sort of acted like he is, again, above the government, above the civilian government of the United States of America. His company Tesla has opened investigations into his debt collection and very likely predatory loans. And then there is significant questions about decisions that Musk has made on the international scene. Now, the fact of the matter is, because Trump and him have waged war on the vast majority of these agencies, they are either weakened in their ability to follow through investigations. And let's just be really clear about this. Let's put our cards on the table. Why am I particularly worried or engaged in what the Department of Agriculture is doing or what the FAA is doing? Right? It's not like David Griscom is, generally getting outraged about an FAA investigation into, this company or that company. The reason that this bothers me is that we supposedly live in a democracy. And in a democracy, the people have the ability to check the rich and the powerful. Now, look, y'all know me. I ain't some, this isn't my first rodeo, right? I know what American society is. But when you see somebody flaunt our rules and our ability to govern the rich and the powerful, it is an evacuation. We are watching an evacuation of the very democratic promise of self-government, of popular government, of democratic government, because what this says very clearly is that, hey, if you're rich enough, you can get away with whatever you want, right? And look, again, we know what American democracy is. I don't care if there has been corruption before. I don't care if sometimes these rulings are unequal and unfair. What I care about is what we're seeing right now, which is an extreme example of that same corruption. So yeah, do these things happen all the time? Sure. This is a flaunting at another level that very much threatens the entire project of democratic government if people are able to so nakedly buy their way out of the rule of the rest of us. And this is the kind of message that I want to remind not just our audience, but just people in general, right? Regardless if you like Musk or if you like Trump, I would like to live in a country. Where the rule of the people is stronger than the whims of billionaires, right? Call me old-fashioned. And what we are seeing right here, what this is a very clear example of, is a democratic system floundering and failing at its very, very core.
Yeah, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but can we indulge a little bit more blame Obama for a split second when it comes to this? This is a little news piece from, I believe, 2009. Let me get the volume up here.
And many others on Capitol Hill say the U.S. should start developing a giant new rocket right away. But President Obama's new space policy holds firmly to the themes he spoke of in a Kennedy Space Center speech.
Yes, pursuing this new strategy will require that we revise the old strategy. In part, this is because the old strategy, including the Constellation program, was not fulfilling its promise in many ways.
The president's goals outlined today in the newly released policy are to expand international cooperation, working with other countries to explore space.
Sounds nice.
And to invest in and nurture the space industry.
Ooh.
By space industry, the president does not mean workers currently in it. such as the thousands working on the shuttle in Florida, Alabama, Texas, and other states. They're being laid off. The president means new companies, such as SpaceX, which just launched its new Falcon 9 rocket from the Cape. The new
There was a debate that was going on about 15 years ago. I remember people like Neil deGrasse Tyson, Bill Nye participating in it.
Mm-hmm.
I think in this wrong direction of let's privatize this stuff. Let's let all of these capitalists decide when and where stuff gets sent up to the moon. And that was the wrong choice. Just like it was the wrong choice to put the bankers above homeowners. Like these things have consequences.
Yeah. I mean, look, these people from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party, I mean, sold out American democracy so clearly, so nakedly, that many people not only don't believe in it, can't even be convinced to, maybe engage in it anymore. And you can't really blame folks for that. And you are seeing right now, I think very clearly, the consequences of that, which I think are more extreme than all of those politicians a decade plus ago thought they would be. Right? They just thought that might mean that, hey, maybe there won't be kind of popular upsurge politics, right? And Chase Bank can get its way. I don't think that they were prepared for what was going to happen. Was that a rich South African was effectively going to buy the United States government to protect himself from base, by the way, very basic oversight. This is not these cases against Musk, they're not egregious, right? This is just very much like, do you have a functioning economy that has very basic rules of the road, regulations on what you can do to human beings, what you can do to the environment, what you can do to animals, right? What you can do to investors, right? This is basic stuff. And he wants to be above it. He wants to live like a lord. And people should take that threat seriously.
And give us credit for basically banging this fucking cowbell for like 7 years at this point.
Don't you understand, Matt, Michael, David, don't you understand Elon Musk is actually working so hard to save the planet from climate change? You might not like everything that he says.
It was just, God, that was nonstop. It was every week on this program and on TMBS, and those people were wrong. The worst thing about this job is you could be right all the time, and you never get rewarded for it. But
I saw somebody say, do you think Elon is really going on these 3-hour podcasts for public relations? Yeah, idiot. Like, of course he's doing it because people like you think they're getting the full story. When what you could do is just look at headlines about his actual goddamn company, right? Maybe or even like lawsuits filed by his worker. You don't need 3 hours with Lex Friedman talking about, some bullshit that he's never actually going to achieve. It's wild.
Yeah. Well, folks, we're going to go over the post game, patreon.com/leftreckoning to get access to it. We got a lot to get to. We have some fun video.
More Elon.
More Elon. Maybe somebody wrote an interesting article about me. Maybe we'll respond to it. We'll see. But folks, we couldn't do it without all of you and your support. So if you haven't already joined up and supported the show, patreon.com/leftreckoning. We got a lot of really exciting stuff coming down in the next couple of weeks. I think we're going to be talking to Eric Blanc soon about union organizing, a little bit of a theme of this program, if you ever noticed, and much more in the near future. So come over, hang out with us. We'll be up there about 10 minutes or so.